If you've checked out Instagram lately, and you follow us on Instagram. If you don't, it's at @flight_youth if you want to follow us, so you want to know what's going on. We're talking about competitive tonight. And, I was going to say, Dylan said something not nice to me earlier, but very true. He's like, it's ironic that we're talking about competitiveness tonight because you're so competitive. Whatever, Dylan. No, but he's right. He's right. Sometimes, pastors, we got to preach what we need, and this is something that I deal with on a regular basis. I am a very competitive person. I think anybody who's played sports or like anything with me knows that I'm competitive. And this kind of throws itself out there. But I'm not the only one, am I? No. There are others of us in this room who are fairly competitive. Fairly? Looking at you, Miller boys. Those of us in this room, we're very competitive. And some of you in this room, you're thinking to yourself, yeah, I'm not competitive. Well, I don't even play sports for that very reason. Oh, but you're competitive too in certain ways, I believe. In some ways, some of you are. We'll get into what that is. But let's turn to Colossians 3, verse 23. If you got your Bible, please use this one. One of these paper ones. But if you don't, go ahead and use your phone. Not a big deal. Just please don't be texting on it. Colossians 3, and we'll start in verse 23. As you're getting there, though, I'll tell you a cool story about my little brother. My little brother's name is Jason. And if you've never met him, let me describe him to you. He's like the most laid-back dude you've ever met in your life. And when we were kids, he was super laid-back. Even more so. And I was even more wound tight. So we were kind of polar opposites. I kind of feel bad for him having to live with me when he was a young kid. Because he's such a nice, gentle person. And there's me like, come on, Jason, let's do this. And I'd push him around like, come on, man. Jason is not competitive at all, I think. That's how he's perceived, at least. When he was a kid, about 8 or 9 years old, he decided he wanted to spend the night at my Aunt Doris's house. Now, if you've been coming here for a while, you maybe have heard me talk about my Aunt Doris before. But if you don't know anything about her, let me tell you this. I think that she is like Jesus in a woman's body. This lady is the nicest, sweetest, kindest, most giving person I've ever met in my life. And she's so thoughtful. The Lord is with this woman. I promise you. She's somebody I really look up to. One of my heroes in the faith. But Jason wants to go spend the night at her house. She's about 65 years old, right, at this point. And Jason says, hey, and Doris, I want to spend the night at your house. And she says, okay, that's fine. This is a Saturday night. We got church. We go to church with Aunt Doris on Sunday mornings. Not a big deal. So he packs all his stuff up and he goes over to Aunt Doris's house. And the next morning we see him at church and everything seemingly is fine as far as we know. But everything was not fine the night before. Because Jason and Aunt Doris decided to play a game of Sorry. Now, I don't know if you've ever played Sorry. If you haven't, then I just feel bad for you because you had a terrible childhood. But Sorry is this game where you got these little pawn pieces. I think it's like 4 or 5 of them. And you got to start at the start, go figure. And you come out, you got to draw these cards. You got to get 2 or you got to get a 1. I think you can get like an 11 and maybe switch places or something. I can't remember. Anyways, you pull it out, and there's like 1 of 2 or maybe 3 ways you can get out of start. It's really hard sometimes. You get on these cold streaks where you just can't draw the right card. Well, he was beating her really badly. And then all of a sudden, my Aunt Doris got on a hot streak. Next thing you know, all of Jason's pieces are back at start, and she has won. Now this 8, 9-year-old little kid, who's so laid back, so sweet, jumps up from the table, screams at her, and says, "You're a cheater! You cheated!" And Doris is looking at him like this. What? Who are you? Because my little brother's not like that. He's never been that way. And he screamed. He was like that with video games and board games. We couldn't have family board game night at my house because Jason ruined it. He would throw stuff. And I was like, who is this kid? He flipped out of my Aunt Doris. We do this stuff though, right? Like some of us were so competitive. This is kind of an epidemic in all of our society in some way, especially when it comes to college football season. Oh yeah.
I don't watch college football.
Hey,
I watch
get a life, man. I can't help you.
I watch NFL.
But But we've got this section over here who roots for this team, this section over here who roots for this team, this section roots for this team, right? And then the smart people root for the Texas Longhorns. But somebody's like, oh no, you offended me, whatever. Okay, but you see how crazy fans get, especially during college football season. You've got the guy who's trying to quarterback his team. He's doing his very best. He was a high-priced recruit, right? And he doesn't play so well in a game. He comes home and his car is egged. His house is vandalized. Why? Because he threw an interception when he should have thrown a touchdown. Like, we're crazy. We're crazy. People get into these crazy mobs of people when it comes to things like sports a lot of times. And some other stuff. My question is this. There's nothing wrong with college football. Obviously, I'm a huge college football fan. I spend all my Saturday watching it. The question we're asking ourselves tonight is, what should a Christian's response be to competitiveness? What should our response be? Can we be competitive? So let me hear. What do you think? Yes or no?
Yes.
I'm hearing some yeses.
Sure. Who wants to challenge? Yeah.
Who wants to challenge the girls up front? Nobody?
We just have to contain it.
We got to contain it. Yeah, in short, I think there's nothing wrong with competitiveness, but our competitiveness should push people to Christ, not take people away from Christ. That's where I think the line is. Now I want to draw that out a little bit. So as we start tonight, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page, what we mean by competitiveness and what competitiveness is. I spent some time looking it up in the dictionary, and their definitions didn't satisfy me because I don't think it's culturally relevant. So we're going to come up with our own. All right? When you hear competitiveness, what do you think? How would you define it? To compete. Okay? Somebody who competes? Okay? Video games. Anybody else? What does competitiveness mean? Richard Sherman. What did you say? Somebody already said something? A bet? Okay. Aims to win. You're striving to win. Challenge?
Excessive passion.
Excessive passion. I was wondering when we were going to get to that one. Yeah, so I think there's three things that we can say when we're talking about competitiveness. The first is you're inclined to compete. Right? Somebody who is inclined to compete. You don't like sitting on the sidelines watching and going, hey, good job. You want to get out there yourself. Right?
Yes.
That's how I live my life. I go to your guys' sporting events and I'm just like, man, I wish I could play. If I could go back, I'd throw a pigskin over there mountains. You got to watch Napoleon Dynamite. Okay. Number two. It's on TV all the time. You can watch it. Number two. That's somebody who's driven to beat others. Now this is kind of like competing, but you not just compete. You want to win. You are driven to win. You will do just about, not everything, but just about everything. You are driven. Yeah? All right? And the third thing is an unhealthy need to win. I have some friends, their whole family's like this. An unhealthy need to win. I'm talking like in the middle of winter at 11 o'clock on a school night, mom and daughter are outside racing down the street barefoot. I'm serious, man. Why? Because they both had this unhealthy need to prove to the other that they were faster. That's stupid. Come on. That's dumb. That is dumb. So let's ask the question, what's wrong with wanting to compete and being driven? In itself, there's nothing wrong with being driven. There's nothing wrong with wanting to compete. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. If you had Colossians, turn it. Let's look at it real quick. Verse 23, if you got it. All right. Whatever you do, the writer says, whatever you do, do your work heartily, as for the Lord rather than for men. Now, what do we mean by heartily? Does somebody want to give me a kind of summary there? When we say heartily? Healthy. Maybe with all you've got. Give everything you have, right? That sounds a little bit like competing. Okay. Whatever you do, Do it as with all you've got, as for the Lord, rather than for people. Knowing that from the Lord you will receive the reward of the inheritance. It is the Lord Christ whom you serve. Josh's parentheses, not your competitiveness. Right? So what I get from that verse, and maybe you can too, what I get from that is the writer's telling us, listen, whatever you are, be the best one there is. But be that for the Lord. If you're going to be a student, be the best student in your entire school. And be that for the Lord. If you're going to be a soccer player, be the best soccer player you could possibly be. And be that for the Lord. Glorify the Lord through things. Why? Well, because it makes him look good. It makes Christ look really good when you do your very best and you give him praise for it. You honor him through that. People love Tim Tebow. Why? Because Tim Tebow is humble. And he's really good. Except in the NFL. And slow burn. But what does he do? In everything, he gives glory to Christ. He gives glory to Christ. And people love that. People admire that. And I think it's something worth admiring. Michael Jordan loved to compete. Greatest basketball player of all time, LeBron fans. Michael Jordan loved to compete. But he had a few setbacks. He did some stuff. But he never gave up. So there's nothing wrong with competing. He could have given up a long time ago when he was cut from his JV basketball team, or he could have done what he kept doing. He kept striving, he kept competing, he kept trying to be better than everybody else. He wanted to win. There's nothing wrong with that. Being driven is an asset in life. Just like it was for Michael Jordan, it can be for you too. Nobody likes the lazy person who doesn't do anything. Right? But you can be driven in ways outside of sports. You can be driven in your career. You can be driven to do a lot of things, to just be the best that you can possibly be, like we're talking here in Colossians. So there's nothing wrong with being driven. It's an asset for you. But, just like a ton of other things, this blessing of competitiveness can turn into tragedy real quick. It can turn into something terrible when abused and used improperly. Sometimes there are blessings like being able to drive a car. You use it wrongly, you get your license taken away, you could hurt yourself or somebody else. Relationships with people, when they're used improperly, they can be abusive, oppressive even. All kind of things. There's nothing wrong with competitiveness in itself, but when we are obsessed with competing, we're obsessed with winning, we take our eyes off of Christ and put them on other people and ourselves. Instead of being focused on Christ, we start focusing on him and what he's gotten, her and what she's gotten, how they compare to us. Let me give you for example. The need to win is often masked by being driven in our culture. It's masked by these things. Though it can be seen outside of sports and career making, in things like having to always be right in a conversation, having to dress in the latest fashions, maybe. You got to be the first one to have those new heels, or I don't know how to do it. The new J's. Your shoe game got to be on point. You know what I'm saying? Maybe what? Maybe for you it's music. You got to be the first person to hear the music because you want to be able to tell everybody else that you heard it first and you were a fan long before they got on the bandwagon. Hipsters, yeah. So this obsession can be found outside of sports and career making. It's this obsessive desire, this obsessive need to win that becomes unhealthy for us and ultimately unchristlike. But we have to understand that there's more to life than being obsessed with winning in anything. Way more to life than that. When you'll do anything to win, there's a problem. You hear about stories of guys and girls who who will shoot up some steroids every once in a while. I say girls because there are a bunch of female athletes who've been caught hitting the steroids. So guys too, right? We see these baseball players, especially some football players, they're hitting the steroids so they can get that muscular advantage. They can be bigger, stronger, faster, all that good stuff, right? When you're willing to put your body in harm's way, when you're willing to ruin your liver and your kidneys just to win, just to be better than somebody else, there's a problem. There's a problem. When you become a different person, inside of a competition, there's an issue. There's a problem there. I used to know this guy who was the nicest, sweetest guy, kind of like my brother. And the first time I ever met him was we were playing basketball. And he was the biggest jerk and whiny baby the whole time. And I didn't talk to him again for another 2 or 3 months. And the next time I talked to him, we were playing basketball again. Same result. So the first 6 to 8 months I knew this guy, I did not like him at all. I did not like him. But then I met him in school. Totally different person. Totally different person. Do you know anybody like this? Who they become a different person when competition of any sort is introduced. Well, that's not God honoring. That's not honoring to Christ. That doesn't make Jesus look good. If that's you, we got to fix that. We got to fix that. We got to back up and take a putt, man. The biggest one here, when your witness for Christ is affected, there's a problem. When the way you're acting begins to affect your ability to be able to draw somebody to Christ, there's an issue. There's an issue. Imagine if Tim Tebow, once he got between the lines, he's a great Christian, but once he got between the lines, he starts screaming obscenities at everybody else and putting them down and throwing cheap shots in the middle of piles, right? He's punching people in the pile like some of these guys do. Can you imagine the fallout from that? Yet some of us live that way daily. And not just in sports, not in career making, but in how we talk to people, how we treat people, how we allow ourselves to conduct our lives. If it affects your ability to be a witness for Christ, it's a problem. And like Dylan was saying, sometimes for me, it is a problem. I'm very competitive, and I have to find it within myself to later come back and say, dude, I'm sorry. There's a few in this room I've had to call you 20 minutes after we've parted ways somewhere and be like, hey man, did I hurt your feelings? Because I didn't mean that like that. And I'm just being a jerk. And that's what it takes sometimes. That's exactly what it takes sometimes. Where you have to just say, man, I may have just really not been a good model there. Call, apologize. Do what you got to do. Because if you're not able to draw people to Christ, you're pushing them from Him. And that's the last thing we want to do. So the question I think we should all be asking ourselves tonight is this: is my level of competitiveness, whether high or low, is my level of competitiveness drawing people to Christ, pushing them away from Christ? That's the bottom line when it comes to Christians and competitiveness. So here's what I want you to know on this last slide, real quick. 2 things. The first is this. There we go. There's nothing wrong with being driven and liking to compete. So when you walk out of here, know that. There's nothing wrong with it. In fact, I think competition is healthy. It pushes us further in life, pushes us beyond what we know we're capable of a lot of times. Be competitive. Be driven to do something. Don't be lazy. Don't just sit around and wait for life to happen. Get out there and do something. Live an exciting life. Nothing wrong with that. Second thing, your competitiveness should push people to Christ. If it doesn't, you got to fix that. For you, some of you, that might mean when you play basketball, you just keep your mouth shut. You don't talk. For some of you, that means when you see an argument going somewhere where you're going to be debating somebody and you know that one of your failings in this area is that you like to put people down and win the debate at all costs, just steer the conversation in a different area. Think ahead of ways you can move the conversation. If for you it is clothes, you got to be having the newest, latest fashion trend, or have the newest J's, whatever. How about the next time the new stuff comes out, you see stuff that you really, really want, you just don't get it. In fact, go to the thrift store instead. Buy something like that. This is my thrift store game right here. Just FYI. Practice this. Make this a discipline for yourself. You won't get it immediately. I'm proof of that. But you'll get better. In all things, we want to point people to Christ, right? Yeah? All right.
I am not your old rat, I am not a clone. Yeah, you are not my puppeteer and I am not a drone. Yeah, got a new master and I follow him alone. On the good life till I'm gone. The song. Yeah. Yes, sir. Come on. Hey, I was born less than human. I know it sounds crazy.